Nobody from my family came to my wedding. The next morning my dad texted asking for $8,400. I sent 1/3 of 1% of it. Weeks later, he showed up at my house with the police. I stood at the altar adjusting my cuffs, staring at the empty front row. 10 chairs, all reserved for my family, all completely empty. My bride, Nora, squeezed my hand, her eyes full of pity and love. My own father had texted an hour before. Can't make it. Transmission on the truck's acting up. Have a good life. A transmission. That was the price of his presence at his only son's wedding. I didn't cry. I'd spent 26 years crying over a family that treated me like an ATM and an afterthought. The ceremony went on. We celebrated. We danced. But a hollow ache sat in my chest all night. The next morning I woke up next to my wife, sun just hitting the blinds, and my phone buzzed. My dad. No congratulations. No, how was the night? Just, need a favor. Your brother got into a legal mess with his landlord. We need $8,400 by noon, or he's getting evicted and sued. Wire it now. The sheer audacity choked me. They couldn't afford gas for a transmission, but they could demand $8 grand for the golden child. I stared at the screen, a cold, hard anger finally igniting after a lifetime of slow burn. I opened my banking app, typed in his routing number, and transferred exactly $1. In the reference note I wrote, for the transmission, don't spend it all in one place. Then I blocked his number. I blocked my mother. I blocked my brother, and for the next 3 weeks, for the first time in my life, I tasted absolute peace. Until yesterday morning, when a loud, aggressive banging echoed through my front door. I opened it to find 2 police officers on my porch, and right behind them, looking smug and self-righteous, was my father. Can I help you, officers? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Sir, the older officer said, your father claims you stole a family heirloom, a vintage watch collection valued over $10,000, and that you're refusing to return it. My dad stepped forward, his face a mask of fake betrayal. Just give it back, son. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You think because you got married you can just rob us? He was trying to ruin me. He couldn't get my money, so he wanted my freedom. He knew I had my late grandfather's watch, the one Grandpa pressed into my hand on his deathbed, precisely because he knew my dad would pawn it for beer money. But there was no paperwork. My word against his. Do you have proof of ownership, sir? The officer asked me. I don't have a receipt, I said calmly, but I have something else. Please, step inside. My dad smirked, thinking he'd won, and followed the officers into my living room. I walked to my bookshelf, took down a small black binder, and handed it over. What's this? The officer asked. A meticulous ledger of every dollar I've loaned my father and brother over the last 6 years, I said, my voice echoing. Signed IOUs, bank statements, and text transcripts where they acknowledge every debt. My dad's face went pale. That has nothing to do with a watch. Actually, it does, I said, turning to look him dead in the eye. The total they owe me is $42,600. I was going to let it go, but since you brought the police to my home, I'd like to formally file a report for fraud. The officers looked at each other, then down at the binder, and the evidence was irrefutable. Wait, no, this is a family matter, my dad stammered, stepping back. You made it a legal matter when you skipped my wedding and brought cops to my porch, I said, the venom finally slipping into my voice. Officers, I want to press charges for filing a false report. Every single one. The smugness drained from my father's face, replaced by pure terror as he realized, far too late, that the quiet son who always said yes was gone. The police escorted him off my porch in handcuffs for the false report, with a financial fraud inquiry now hanging over him. I watched from the window as they put him in the cruiser, and I didn't feel sad, and I didn't feel regret. The watch, by the way, is still in my sock drawer, exactly where my grandfather wanted it, and one day it goes to whatever kid Nora and I raise, along with the whole story of the day their great-grandfather chose me. That's the only inheritance in this family worth anything. Everything else my father guarded so carefully turned out to be debts he never intended to pay. I closed the blinds, walked back to the kitchen, and poured a cup of coffee for my wife, my real family.